Hey everyone. I would like to give you a quick 6 to 10 minute explanation of what my final project is for our graduate school class on science fiction. What I've decided to do is create a practical science fiction short story unit plan that discusses three particular golden age texts. The reason I decided to create this particular final project is because I am a high school teacher. And as I was reading a few of our texts, particularly the Golden Age texts, I found relatable stories that kids can be involved in. If you think about some video games that have come out recently that kids really like, Fallout is about science and technology and space and atomic fallout. So those kind of themes that kids see in video games, I was hoping they could relate to some of the texts that we've read. And so what I've picked are two texts from our class. I picked the cold equations and second variety. And then I also added in another shorter story, There Will Come Soft Rains by Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury is an iconic golden age science fiction writer. So the first thing that I created when it came to this final project, of course, is a unit plan. And essentially what this is a practical map for not students, excuse me, a student teacher or a high school teacher to follow whenever teaching the actual unit plan. I've titled it Confronting Our Future, Science Fiction Short Story Analysis. And then the assessment evidence that you'll find throughout this are quizzes, guided questions, literary analysis worksheets, creative projects, and I want to go ahead and add in there a summative assessment, aka a test. Okay, so let's look at the very first lesson. Lesson 1, Intro to Sci-Fi. The way I would launch this lesson is to have the students participate in an anticipation reaction activity designed for this particular unit. I really like starting a unit with something like this because what it does is it gets the kids up and moving, and it has them basically side whether or not they agree or disagree with a statement, and the statement is a theme that you might find throughout the reading. This is the anticipation reaction guide that I've created for this particular activity. Um, Basically, I put this on the smartboard. I ask them if they agree or disagree. They have to go to the side of the arrow that says agree with their whole body. If they agree with a statement, they go to the side of the room that says disagree if they disagree with the statement. Really easy for students to get involved with. They end up enjoying this, and oftentimes it takes more time than I actually allot because they really talk about this once they stand up and move. So the first question is, we should always try to advance technology, even if we don't perfectly understand it. And this is before reading anything about science fiction. This is before being taught what Golden Age science fiction is. Before reading any of our texts, they have to come to these conclusions at the very beginning. So we should always try to advance technology, even if we don't perfectly understand it. Every student will stand up. The ones who agree with this will go to the other side of the room that says agree. The ones that disagree will go to that side of the room, and then we can have a discussion if the students want to. And I go through and I have a lot of these questions. We are better off than our ancestors because of technology. Using nuclear weapons on Japan was the right thing to do. These are kind of some hard-hitting questions. I get into a few questions about the Cold War, of course, because later Golden Age science fiction is a reaction to the Cold War. And this is a really fun activity. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of here. And in the first lesson, we also are going to do some nonfiction reading. The three articles that we read are The Cold War, Duck and Cover, and The Decision to Drop the Bomb. Now, you'll notice that I'm focusing really hard on communism, nuclear warfare, and the Cold War. And the reason for that is I'm particularly focusing on the later age, the post-atomic age of Golden Age science fiction, so like 1950s. And here is an example of the Duck and Cover text. I got this from Common Lit. It's by Jessica McBurney. Common Lit is a really good website for teachers that has different reading level examples of the same text. What's really cool is I can go to Common Lit and I can download this article in 4 different reading levels. So it's the same article, but it uses language that's more accessible for different students in the classroom. And so I can assign it on Google Classroom, for example, to a particular student. He's reading the same article as the person sitting next to him, but the person sitting next to him might be reading a 1200 level Lexile version of this text, whereas he's reading a 800 level Lexile version of this text. They're both being challenged, they're both reading, and they're getting the same content, but in a different method. And so this is a really cool website, and I'll be citing that in my Works Cited page too. Okay, so that's basically the first lesson. We're doing some thematic discussion and then getting into some of the historical pieces that have influenced later Golden Age sci-fi. Now, the second lesson, and again, you'll see I have a launch, activities for the middle of the lesson, the materials you'll need, and then the closure, so how I would recommend closing the lesson. The launch for the second lesson, we're going to show an image of an atomic shadow from Hiroshima and give the students time to write about it. And then this activity is we're going to talk a little bit about Golden Age science fiction through a PowerPoint that I've created. And then we're going to read and listen to There Will Come Soft Rains by Ray Bradbury. When we read There Will Come Soft Rains by Ray Bradbury, they'll have the text open in front of them on a Chromebook or printed out if I choose to do that for some students. And then we'll also listen to this audiobook, which I've linked here. What's really cool about this audiobook is that it has some sound effects while you're reading, and it really incorporates the auditory and visual input for the students when they're reading this first text. Now, I am going chronological for my 3 texts. There Will Come Soft Rains. It's published in 1950. Second Variety by Dick, that's published in 1953. And then Cold Equations, of course, is published in 1954. So that's the order that I'm going with if you're wondering why I chose which text to go first and which text to go last. Here's an example, or here is the Golden Age Sci-Fi PowerPoint that I'm going to be showing. Okay, the students are going to get a brief history about it, and I'm going to talk about this in person with them. We'll talk about early Golden Age sci-fi, different characteristics, of course, late Golden Age sci-fi, which is what our emphasis is in particular, and then we'll talk really about why it's more skeptical than the earlier Golden Age science fiction. Got a pretty cool quote from historian Adam Roberts, and then end up, and again, I'm going to work on my Works Cited a little bit here, but here's where I got that information from, these 3 sources. So that's the PowerPoint I go over, and then we read There Will Come Soft Rains, and we do just a little bit of work with it, but mostly I don't want them to actually work a lot during this class period. I would like them to engage the text authentically without having to answer questions or do anything tedious. We're really just going to listen to it. Okay. The next text we're going to go over is the Second Variety. And this is lesson 3. You can see my launch, activities, materials, so on and so forth. And then lesson 4, Second Variety again. Lesson 5 is Second Variety Creative Project. Now I opened my Second Variety folder. Here are some of my examples of like the things that I've created. Here's the text that I found online. Here's a quiz, writing prompt. Okay, here is the prompt that you put on the board. When they come in, that's one of my launches. Here's another one of their launches. They come in the door and they respond to this. Imagine a future in which we each have a personalized robot. What would yours be like? What would it do? What features would it have and why? Okay, these are just kind of how I start the classroom, get them thinking. The really cool part for this text, the Second Variety, is a project called the Final Variety that I've created. Now, the Final Variety is essentially they have to create a weaponized robot for the modern person. So Philip K. Dick creates these robots that are supposed to really appeal to humans, and that's how they die. I mean, that's how they're made vulnerable, and that's how they're defeated. So what would the final variety be? What would the robot look like today, or the android, or whatever you want to talk about? What would it look like today? What would lure the modern person into that trap? And so this is what they have to do: create their own weaponized android. They have to draw it up, and then they have to present it. And this is the rubric that they're supposed to follow. Okay, now the final text that we're going to go over is The Cold Equations by Tom Godwin. Again, I launch it. This is one of my launches. What would you do if you knew that you had only 1 hour to live? And we know, of course, that Marilyn is the character in this text that only has an hour to live. And so the students have to respond to this in their journals. I have a discussion chart that helps me keep track of who's talking. I also have the PDF here, guided questions, creative project, analysis, and then quiz. So lots of materials for the cold equations. I've created multiple because I'd like to be able to give specific groups of students specific homework assignments. You don't want to just give a blanket homework assignment to every single student. And so if I'm teaching this to an honors level group, I might have them be more creative or analytical. If I give it to a lower level sophomore, then I might have them just do quizzes and guided questions, so I know that they're comprehending the text on a lower level rather than a higher level. And that's pretty much it. If you scroll down to the bottom, I have a summative assessment for the unit, which is essentially a very standardized test, right? Multiple choice comprehension over the materials that we've gone over, in an essay where they have to select one of the 3 texts and argue, why is this text perfect for late golden age sci-fi? What is it saying to its reader, and how does it fit into that genre? And that's essentially it. So far I've got my unit plan totally finished. I have almost all of my materials totally completed except for this final summative assessment. It's the last thing I have to do. And then I'm also planning on writing a defense, like a pedagogical defense of why I've chosen these particular activities. I've already kind of got that roughly drawn up, but I don't quite have that together. Basically, I'm going to say, why am I doing group work? Why am I having them learn about the history behind it before I read the text? What is the methodology for why I've chosen the particular creative projects I've done? Why I use summative assessment? Why I use formative assessment? So it's basically a defense of these choices, these pedagogical choices that I've made. That's going to be a 2 to 3 page sort of piece, double spaced. That will have sources. Harry and Rosemary Wong those are 2 people that I'll reference quite a bit. And if you've watched all the way to the end of this and you have a particular pedagogue that you follow or you think is really smart and I might be able to look into and cite in my 3-page defense, send it my way. I would love to learn a little bit more. So that's my final project, my sci-fi short story. Unit plan, Confronting Our Future, Science Fiction Short Story Analysis. Have a wonderful day, and good luck on all of your projects as well.